don't use pencils. I always say use a black fine liner or ball pen, something that stays, because it gets you in the habit of creating and continuing to create instead of starting the editing process while you're still creating. It's like with brainstorming. You want to get everything out and then you can edit later and kick things out and group them and rearrange things.
I really like mind mapping because compared to like making a list or something, I can just sort of go anywhere. It's super free. So I still use mind maps all the time to get ideas out.
I was insanely lucky. I think I learned about mind mapping from about sort of age 8, 9, that kind of thing at school. And that helped me enormously throughout my life.
I've just remembered, this is my journal. Ugly. It's just pages and pages of words. Hello and welcome to Sketchplanations, the podcast, the fortnightly audio feast for those curious of mind who enjoy poking and prodding into life's mysteries and wonders, all drawn from the collection of sketches at sketchplanations.com. I'm engineer and broadcaster Rob Bell, and with me, as always, is the father of Sketchplanations, John O'Hay, and established entrepreneur and past winner of The Apprentice, it's Tom Bellerone, and I'm delighted to say that for this episode on MindMap Travel Journals, we have an expert guest joining us, a master of design, visual thinking, and sketch/sketchnoting. For well over a decade, Eva-Lotta Lamm worked for companies like Google, Yahoo, and Skype as a digital user experience and product designer, and more recently, she consults with her varied clients, helping them to make complex problems visual so they can be seen from a fresh perspective in order to solve them more efficiently. Her work as a sketchnoter and illustrator has been published in a number of books, including a travel diary in sketchnote and mind map form from her own epic 14-month odyssey around the globe, making her the perfect and perfectly welcome guest on the podcast today. Eva-Lotta, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Eva-Lotta and Johnny, you guys work in a similar sphere, I guess, with the activities that you do.
We have similar paths in some ways. I've worked a long time as a UX designer and strategy in general, and I've done a lot of visualization along the way, which is obviously what kicked off Sketchplanations. But Eva-Lotta, I feel like you've done so many more and so many different things before and since.
Yeah, it's been an odyssey in itself, my career. I don't know. For a long time, as you said, I worked as a UX designer with changing titles. You know, some was information architecture related, and I was called interaction designer, interface designer. I mean, the titles changed, as we know, in this world. But actually, this world trip that you were talking about, where I did the sketchnoting or the sketch journaling, was actually also a change in my career. So I took these 14 months off. Actually, it was not only taking time off, it was we quit our jobs, left our flat, sold a lot of our belongings, and had a little bit in storage, and then went off with a 40-liter backpack and like 2 outfits to change depending on the weather and what is not dirty at the time. So you don't have to take very many decisions clothing-wise, which is great, which I loved. It actually also was a change in my job because when we came back from the world trip, I was thinking, do I want to work again as a UX designer in this field, or do I want to make sketching and visual thinking actually the center of my activity? I had been doing that by the side and during my personal leave time for 5 years, like speaking at conferences and teaching workshops and doing stuff like that. Up to the point that it almost took all my holidays. So the travel was mostly like to conference locations, maybe having a few days or sometimes a week, depending on the location, to take some free time. But it took up a lot of my annual leave as an employee. And so when we came back, I was thinking, well, maybe I should try to make the visual thinking thing the main focus of what I do, and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I can always find another job. So I've been doing that for 8 years now. I'm self-employed, and I work with my own clients, and I teach people how to think visually themselves.
So then, in this episode, we're talking MindMap travel journals, the act of recording the ins and outs of your travel experiences through a visually engaging mind map diagram, rather than, or perhaps in addition to, a fully blown written journal or just taking loads of photos on your phone. We'll be discussing why MindMap travel journals are so great. We've a couple of exceptional examples to share with you, and we'll talk about how to get started on your own, along with hints and tips for making them as good as they can be. Now, you should be able to see Jono's sketch for this up on your screens as the artwork for this episode now. And if you want to take a closer look or see more related sketches, then head to sketchplanations.com. And if there's anything we talk about that prompts you to share your own travel journaling tales or questions, thoughts and theories on mind maps and the like, then please send your emails to
hello@sketchplanations.com.
Or you can head to the podcast website, podcast.sketchplanations.com, and leave us a voice note. Right then, Eva-Lotta, as a kid, were you into drawing? And is this a skill and a passion that you've had all your life, or is it something that you developed later on, that you enjoyed doodling and then that turned into something else and got a bit more serious?
I always liked to draw, and actually I studied design out of the very naive conception that, well, I like to draw, so maybe I should study design. And at the time when I took this decision, the internet wasn't really much around yet. I lived in a small town in the south of Germany. There were no designers in this town, and I didn't really know what design meant. It's like, I always liked fonts and type, kind of different shapes
and a bit of drawing.
And a bit of drawing. And I thought, okay, well, then I become a designer. And the cool thing is that by accident, I chose the right thing to study, because when I then actually discovered what design entails and what possibilities you have, and then the internet also came around and brought even more possibilities doing interactive stuff, then I was like, wow, this is so much cooler than just drawing shit. And actually this stuff was so cool, especially the interactive stuff, for a while, that when I after graduating, there were several years when I was hardly drawing anything. Like, I went straight to the computer, just doing whatever you do as a designer, but drawing had completely left my practice, I would say. Right. Until I started going to conferences. The first conference I went to was one in London, I think in 2007. And because I have a horrible memory and I can't remember anything after 3 days, I can tell you, there were lots of great talks with great stuff, but I forgot what they were about and the details on top. So I took notes, and because I was used to taking notes in a visual way from keeping a sketchbook during my design studies, and also basically that's the mode you basically think in and keep your thoughts and make your notes when somebody tells you something, or there's some form of lecture or something you take in. So it was a natural way for me just to mix images and words. Especially at a design conference, they show stuff, and so you make a little scribble of what they show. And that was just something I did, and I took photos and put them on Flickr, which existed back at the time. I think it still exists. And I uploaded it, and I also, around that time, I saw on Flickr photos from Mike Rohde's first sketch node. That he did at South by Southwest. I think that was 2006 or 2007 as well. And I saw that picture and I'm like, oh, there's somebody else doing something like this. And he gave it a name because he had the hashtag sketchnotes in it. And I'm like, oh, well, sketchnotes, that's a good hashtag for that. That's a good name for that. Maybe it's a thing. So I tagged mine sketchnotes as well. And for a very long time, for several years, it was like a growing number of people. Like at the beginning, it was a handful of people. Really, you could count them. There were 3 or 4 people doing that as well and calling it sketch notes. And then it was slowly growing. And I mean, now it's kind of, there are books and courses and and everybody is doing that, which is great. So Mike did a great job of spreading the technique, or spreading the term for the technique as well, because probably some way of visual note taking has been around forever.
But once you give it a name, it can then take off, right? And other people can label themselves as sketchnoters as well. I love this story, Eva-Lotta, because I mean, as someone who didn't really know what they wanted to do until I kind of stumbled on it by accident at 32. And in fact, as a trio, we probably haven't followed what you might call traditional career routes. I'm so motivated to hear other stories who have integrated their passions and what they're good at and what they enjoy doing in their spare time into their profession. I think it's wonderful, and I think it's really inspiring, and I'd encourage so many people to at least consider it. I love that story. It's great.
Yeah, when I started doing this, I mean, coming back to giving something a name, because I think that's an important point as well. But I think by seeing that somebody gave this kind of thing a name, it also became more of a thing in my head, and I became more interested in how I do this thing. Right. So what actually makes this a sketch note, as opposed to just notes in general with a little scribble in between. So this actually also prompted me to look at the way I take notes in a visual way, in a more conscious way, I would say, to observe my technique or what choices I make. So that's really powerful, to give something a name in many ways.
It really is. I was wondering if Jono and Tommy, have you ever used the services of a sketch note or a sketch note facilitator to enable you all to visualize better maybe the problems or the challenges that you're trying to overcome as a group? I certainly have. And when I worked in an office, I remember doing it. I had a group of people where there was some tension, and we brought in a sketch note facilitator, and it really helped communicate clearly the things we need to overcome.
When I worked at Jump Associates, which is a design and strategy firm or growth strategy firm in California, we would facilitate our own sort of client meetings, and we typically bring in somebody from another team quite often to help record the meetings when you have somebody with a client, particularly like the early ones where you're talking around a problem and there's lots of different potential viewpoints, and we produced some brilliant things. I mean, so many people there were so much better than I was, and I picked up a lot. But I remember it was really powerful. It's powerful after the fact. Like if you publish this afterwards and people look back on a conference or something and they can remember all the talks, and that's lovely. And it's a really nice record. But during the sessions as well, it having like your conversation and the key points up on the board as you spoke shaped the conversation, and people would come back to some other thing, and then collectively you'd make better sense of it. And it was really cool, and I learned a lot there from a lot of people, which influenced all my style of drawing today, and perhaps why I ended up doing a MindMap travel journal. But Tom, you probably taught me mind mapping a long time ago, and I think that influenced, because very often sketchnoting there's lots of different ways of sketchnoting, but mind mapping is one of the ways that you can sort of capture a conference or something like that.
Yeah, so I was insanely lucky, and I think I learned about mind mapping in the late 80s when I was very young. So from about sort of age 8, 9, 10, that kind of thing at school, it was just coming out. Ironically, it was the geography teacher who decided to start doing a course called Study Skills, which was probably the most useful of any subject I've ever done, almost in my entire life. And basically, he got the Tony Buzan set of videos, and we just watched Tony Buzan go to work and mind mapping, and that helped me enormously throughout my life.
Can I just clarify who Tony helped me with the surname?
Buzan?
I'd say Tony Buzan.
Is he like the godfather of mind mapping then? Yes. That's a big nod from Eva-Lotta. Yes.
Have you seen his books? I mean, they're a long time ago.
I have looked at some of his. Was it a book? Was it a video? Was it a talk of him? Some way, shape, or form where he explains his thinking. And I think the technique is great. I find his approach very, very prescriptive. He's very precise on what goes on the lines and what goes on the nodes.
Yeah, and only one word, I think, was only allowed.
Okay.
I'm a little bit more of a freestyle person. So I'm an improviser at heart. Like I also do theater improvisation, and I feel like the design process and the sketching process, and especially the sketchnoting process, is an improvisation process, because you don't know in the beginning what you're gonna get at the end, and you make decisions informed by what just happened or what is happening right now. So it's great to have as a technique, but it was too prescriptive for me to stick to the T, just to the mind mapping.
Yeah, I get it. I'm glad you brought up the improvisation, Eva-Lotta, because I wanted to ask you about that briefly. And it may come up in conversation later on when we're talking about it. But what's an example of that? Is it where, in my mind, as you were talking there, I was thinking maybe you've decided on a metaphor or an analogy maybe to describe a conversation in a slightly different way, so maybe it's clearer. I don't know, maybe you've used the example of cars, I don't know, as an analogy for something else, but then you've sketched out your car as your analogy, and then you're like, right, okay, well now I can take that a bit further and I can do something on wheels or whatever it might be. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, or is it this kind of constant decision making of where you take things next? I'm fascinated by it.
I think you could think about it on several levels. So the idea that, or the thought that you just gave when you say, okay, I'm making an analogy, or for example, I don't know, I decided for some weird reason, somebody's talking about ideas, and in one of the pictures I decide the idea is represented by a car. So when you have lots of ideas, it's like a huge car park full of cars, and then there are different colored cars, and then there are more expensive cars, and some are already kind of dented and kind of had an accident, and maybe they are not so good, and then there are some really shiny ones that are attractive. I don't know. So
I like it. I'm following you on this. I'm with you. This is great.
So then maybe it's always a good idea to take something that you already did and run with it, because when you draw in series, and when you have a series of pictures that are related by a common object or a common, it could also be a common line weight or just some common element, it just makes it so much more rewarding for the viewer to look at it, because they can see see the thread going through it, the idea going through it.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes it also forces you to actually like do weird stuff, because then when you think about, I mean, the choice of an idea being represented by a car for whatever reason is already a bit wacky for me. But then you could think about, well, what do you do when you select ideas? I don't know, there's this car dealership then, and you have to select them. Or what does a great idea look like, and what does a bad idea look like? And does a fast car represent as an idea? I don't know, you can take this analogy and spin it and
just keep running with
it, and also come up with quite unusual and maybe sometimes a little bit weird and wacky image ideas for concepts that might be otherwise quite dry, because let's be honest, a lot of the time when we're sketchnoting quite conceptual things, and there is no physical representation of big concepts like, I don't know, sustainability or equality or growth or whatever. We need to find physical things in this world that we can draw to kind of represent it and make metaphors and analogies.
And in doing so, hopefully make it clearer for people to understand and maybe make their own connections and see their own roles within it.
Yes, because the amazing thing about analogies, what I love about analogies is that we're basically tapping into knowledge that everybody has, like this life experience of, I don't know, when you say our project setup is either like a garden party or like a space mission, you can immediately think about what the different feel is, and maybe how you work together, and maybe what the project is about, or how it's going to be run, how long it will take. So we're tapping into the knowledge that people already have about the world. How certain systems work, a garden works different from a factory. They are both systems. They are both things that get produced. They both have inputs. One is seeds and you grow fruit. And the other one, you have, I don't know, a raw material and you create a car or something. But they have different feels and different things that could remind us of other things to explore. So analogies are fascinating and beautiful, and I love this topic.
I can tell. It's wonderful. It's brilliant hearing you speak about it.
I love the connection. I've heard about like design as essentially a conversation that you're putting something down on paper and then you're seeing that and you're kind of reacting to it. And I guess I hadn't quite extended it to be like it's an improvisation and you're constantly going, oh, what if I go this way? I'm gonna run with this because that's what I would do. And so in improvisation, but it might just be me. I'm improvising with me as opposed to with a partner or other actors.
Yeah, I mean,
Brilliant.
One of the principles of improvisation is the yes and. Probably everybody knows that. So
Yes.
And I also like to add the what if? What if this car has had an accident? What does it mean for the idea? What is the idea was just axed by the CEO because they didn't like it, so it crashed. Boom.
Yeah.
So by forcing yourself to making these forced fits to what you already chose, it can actually trigger quite a lot of interesting thoughts that you would otherwise probably not have had. So you can surprise yourself.
Well, listen, at the risk of overextending the analogy any further, I'm going to park that conversation there. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased with myself. So let's get on to MindMap travel journals. Now, I know that 75% of us on this podcast have published MindMap journals of their own travels, or maybe 50%. Jono and Eva-Lotta have. And I've seen them, and I can tell you they are spectacular. And I will highlight at the very top of this episode description notes the links for listeners to bring them up in front of them now on their screens if they want to, or you can take a peek later at them. It's well worth it, I promise you, to have a look at Jono and Eva-Lotta's MindMap travel journals.
You don't really want to look at mine. Mine aren't good enough to be shared or looked at. But
well, we can publish them later, Tommy. Before we come on to the journaling session, and we talked about it a little bit already, but Jono, can you give us a kind of crisp explanation of what a mind map is, just for anybody who maybe doesn't know what it is or use them?
In a way, I credit Tom with introducing this to me. I'm actually not so bad at thinking sort of linearly and dealing with text and speech and stuff. And Tom is able to make all sorts of connections in all sorts of ways. And mind mapping was introduced to me as this brilliant, like, our minds can take in information non-linearly. And so we can look at a scene and pick out all these different bits at the same time. We don't have to read one word after another. And so a mind map is, I'm going to put what it is this is about in the center of my piece of paper. And then I'm just going to connect. And so I think, oh, I thought about this topic and then this was the first thing that came to mind. And when I think of that, these other things come to mind. And I just attach these as their own like nodes, one by one, until I've built this sort of map or network. And I really like mind mapping because compared to like making a list or something, I can just sort of go anywhere. It's super free. So I still use mind maps all the time to just get ideas out. But they're also lovely to come back to, like, to look at as a finished thing. And you can also take it in non-linear, and you can go over here and go over there and go over there, instead of like reading your way through it like you might a journal. So for me, a mind map is start in the middle with a concept, and you're just connecting thoughts to that as you radiate outward from the center. It's about connecting ideas and getting them down on paper in the simplest way.
And so the topic of this episode, the MindMap travel journal, is applying that to going off on your travels, right? And for an example, I know yours, Jono, you took a location, and I imagine you're there for a while, and then that was in the center. Out goes the mind map from there.
Yeah, so we were in this town for a bit, and hey, we did this factory tour, and there were some fun things in the factory tour, and we tried all these foods or whatever. Oh, and we also went to the beach, and we did these things at the beach, and you're just connecting across this, and you can add pictures and use colors and just have a bit of fun with it as you go. Yeah.
And so then, Eva-Lotta, on your MindMap travel journal, this is 14 months of travel.
Mm-hmm.
Did you set out with the intention of creating this collection of mind maps with the locations you went to?
Yes, I set out with the intention of sketchnoting the trip, because I hate taking photos. I like to be in the moment and experience whatever's going on and look at things, and I don't like taking photos. And so I thought it's a good opportunity to do kind of a sketch journal. And I had a little think beforehand, and I'm also not a good journaler in terms of linear journaling and telling a story.
Okay.
I'm a horrible storyteller. I'm very good at setting up scenes and describing a scene, but then making something happen.
Yeah.
I'm just
with a flowing narrative.
no. I'm good at
peaks
I'm
and
good at
troughs.
snapshots. I think that's what I'm good at. And so I was thinking, how can I structure this journal so that I don't have to write stories, because I can't. And I thought about the things that I would like to remember or that I usually enjoy during my travels. So I created actually an empty sketchbook with some printed prompts in it. So I had them printed.
Okay.
I had a spread, like a double page for every day was the plan. Sometimes I summarized a couple or 3 days together when, I don't know, when we went 20 hours on a bus or something. You can't draw on a bus, not much happens. Sometimes a lot happens in a bus, depending on where you are, but that's a different story. So one spread per day. And I chose a few prompts for myself to do every day.
Like what? What might some of those prompts look
I
like?
have one spread here in front of me. So something I had to eat or drink today, because eating and drinking in foreign countries is always exciting. Someone I saw or talked to today, because people in different countries are super interesting, either to talk to or just to observe. Something that made me smile today, because that's always a good thing. Something I learned today, or maybe something interesting I saw today, because there's always strange things that you might not quite understand or that are different from your home country, and you notice them. They can be really small. Then an idea or thought I had today, because I also wanted to make it a little bit internal to kind of capture what's going on in my mind.
Okay, yes.
And then the best thing that happened today, which I often change to just a very good thing or something that happened today, because it's so hard to pick the best thing. It's putting too much pressure.
Yeah.
You don't want to put the pressure on. Yeah, exactly.
And then the last one was a fact about me, just a random fact about me, because I was also thinking I want to put something from me in there and see what the travels, what kind of memories or random things that I want to say about me would inspire. Like, you know, different surroundings give you different thoughts about yourself, or maybe things that you remember that you had forgotten. So I don't know. That was the choice I made in the beginning.
Different thoughts and different feelings, perhaps, as well. Because I was going to ask you how you would go about capturing emotions or any kind of spiritual type experiences, but it feels that what you've set out there within that quasi template, if you like, that was very intentional, absolutely, that you would capture that. Anything that was significant in that you sense, so your emotions and, you know, how you were feeling. It seems that you would have captured that.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it mixes itself in. I mean, just by choosing the moments that you put in there for that day, it already shows what interests you and what resonates with you. And then, of course, when I'm telling a little story about I don't know, something that made me smile today, then why did it make me smile, or it made me happy, or some other incident about somebody I talked to, how did I feel when I talked to them, or I was curious about them, or they told an amazing story, or they were really weird, or I don't know. So yeah, that already is in my relationship with the thing that I choose to put down.
Jono and Tommy, what Eva-Lotta's described there with her planning and intentional sketchnoting of her travel experiences, does that resonate with you guys in what you guys did?
Rob, remember we went to Canada together, and I've just found that, and I used this was using a bit of software at the time, the MindMap that I made from the first week, and I've discovered I made one of these every week.
Did you really?
Of what we did, yeah. Certainly for 6 weeks, and I would sort of would do it by day, and then also go into a bit of the details. You know, the food is always when you're traveling, the people, because you meet, I'd like to say crazy people, but you meet fascinating people, don't you? There's always, like, I just went away for the weekend in the Cotswolds, and I went into a pub to get a drink for the kids, and there was this really crazy man at the bar. but we had such an interesting chat. Like, he literally had one tooth left, and it was a really intelligent guy as well. He was telling me all fascinating things. But that, when you're traveling and you're in Vietnam, whatever, the people you meet are incredible. But my drawings and my skills are nowhere near the other two that we have on this.
That's what clip art's for.
A question I would love to hear the answer from both of these two is, when you are doing these things on the page, do you almost already see what you're going to draw, or is it you just put the pen down or the pencil down or the stylus onto the page and then it just comes? Eva-Lotta was shaking her head saying that. So how is your sort of process?
Well, one of the things that I discovered is a concept called aphantasia, which is basically the possibility or impossibility to bring things up visually in your mind's eye. So when you close your eyes and I say, imagine a red apple with a green spot and it's on a blue table. And can you see that? And to which degree can you see that? And different people have different capabilities. Some see that like it was a picture, really as a really detailed scene, and some see nothing. The same as we also have an inner narrator in our ear. If we hear our thoughts as a voice, some people do, and some people don't hear their thoughts as a voice. So when you think about somebody who sketches, I think you would probably think, oh, they have a brilliant mind's eye and they see everything crisp and they just spit it out onto the paper as they imagined in their head.
I would assume that,
Yes, absolute no for me. I'm on the aphantasia scale. I see hardly anything. I find it so hard. I get black, blurry, and then it's gone again. So
you have to get it down.
I have to draw to know what I draw next, because I need to make a stroke to see what it looks like to inform the next stroke. And the same with my sketches. I need to make them in order to know what the next step is. That's also very close to improvisation, because you're always going off just happened before.
That's cool. I think I'm a bit more the other side on the aphantasia. Like, I can shut my eyes and visualize things, I think, fairly well. I think I just have to be like a little bit ahead of myself to go, if I keep going this way, it's going to roughly look like that. And so I'm going to need to make it smaller. But I don't need to do that like a little bit in advance of getting to the edge of the page so that I've not messed it up. But I'm able to do that. But it's so interesting because with improvisation, and I did some really fun improvisation classes with Dan Klein at Stanford, and there's a few of them. And I remember, like, one of the things I was guilty of in improvisation, we would play these games like which you always do in improv, like throwing balls around a thing and making a sound. And I would do what's called stockpiling. Yeah, which is where stockpiling is where you're thinking ahead.
Okay.
Like, somebody's about to throw the ball at me, so I need a new sound. And if two balls come at me quickly, I'm going to need two sounds. And I was quite good at thinking ahead of that. And of course, that's completely not the point of improv. And so the games, what you do is you make it harder and harder, so that there's so many things coming at you that you can't possibly stockpile, and you just have to actually improvise. And I think, so when I've never associated it with drawings in a way, but in a way it's much freer just to go, I'm not going to think ahead too far on this page here, and I'm going to draw to see what I draw next. Whereas maybe I'm a bit guilty of like thinking ahead all the time, and that probably constrains what I do, I would think.
I've seen your Trouble Journal Mind actually, and it just all works. And I was going to ask if you'd kind of planned it all out in pencil or something before you inked it all in and allowed and figured out all the interconnections and where things were going to go, or just go for it. And it sounds like you perhaps do more of that, and Eva-Lotta gets it down and works from it.
I think that's true, except that I would also say, and the reason why I go with mind maps, for example, but it doesn't have to be mind maps, it's just putting information on paper, not in a linear way, is that you put, like I said, if I go to think, we went to the beach and we had some fun cocktails. And then later on, you remember that, we met that really fun couple who showed us that cool game on the beach. And you can just squeeze that in later. And that just just happens, and that's fine. And so if you look at it, it kind of all fits, but that's just because you're using whatever space is available. The beauty of it is you can't there's no way that you could sit and look, because some of these pages, yours as well, right? They're completely full from bottom corner to the top corner. There's no way you could sit and have that in your mind at the beginning. So of course you're like making it up as you go.
Being able to do it digitally, how's that changed that? Because you can move stuff around a bit, or would you see that as cheating?
Well, my take on it is when I teach a lot of people how to draw and how to draw for visual thinking. So it's for sketchnoting or your own thoughts or travel journaling or whatever you want to do with it. But sketching in a simple way that is kind of also accessible to people who think they don't have artistic skills. And how I teach it, I always teach it analog with pen and paper, because this is the basis, you're not distracted by technology and by being able to handle the app and handle the tool. And also I don't use pencils. I always say use a black fine liner or ball pen or whatever, something that stays, because it gets you in the habit of creating and continuing to create instead of starting the editing process while you're still creating. It's like with brainstorming. You want to get everything out, and then you can edit later and kick things out and group them and rearrange things. And for me, the spontaneous form of sketching and of sketchnoting, like doing it in the moment at the speed of the talk or at the speed of your own thoughts or at the speed of the group's ideas, is more of a collection. And it's all about getting something material onto the paper. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exactly in the right spot. You can, if you really need that material and you want to do something with it, you can always regroup it later and edit it and find a better picture. Like what I often do when I do real summaries, I do a sketchnoted collection of things. And then I do a second take where I reorder things, put in some subheadings so that it's actually also consumable by people who are not in the room, that has a little bit more structure and a little bit more better arrangement for understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this is great doing it digitally, because you can just do your collection digitally and do and then afterwards you can sit down and think about what are the things you can regroup. You can fill in a picture that's missing, you can fill in some heading or some detail that's missing, and that's just with digital. It's much easier to actually repurpose your live drawings and turn them into something that you might want to use longer term.
Lovely.
Nice. Just saying that, particularly when it comes to travel journals, I really like the pen and paper and a book, because it's so much easier to, like, at the end of the day, you're in a cafe or a bar, you can get your book out and put it on the table and start drawing in it, and you don't have to worry about carrying tech around, and you don't get distracted by anything else. It's just a lovely exercise to do, to be drawing in a book at the end of the day. Or you can, be waiting for a bus or something like that, and you're like, fill in a few pages, and you're not worried about somebody running off with it or anything like that. It's just a lovely thing that you can hand it to the person you're with for them to add some stuff to it. Definitely would vote for pen and paper when it comes to the travel journal, for sure.
Yeah, I also would feel, I would feel really weird sitting somewhere with my iPad and drawing. I don't know why it feels weird, except for in a co-working space or in a cafe and I'm working. But like, it would feel weird. And especially on the travels, the places I travel to, I wouldn't have pulled my iPad out in a lot of places where I drew on paper.
Do you get joy from looking back and reading back through your travel journals, be they in MindMap or sketchnote formats?
I get joy looking at some of other people's. Like John and Eva-Lotta's are just such beautiful works of art in themselves that it's just incredible looking at them. I get a little bit of joy from looking at mine, but mainly I get I should practice drawing more feeling.
If I look back at them now, they make me happy because they remind me instantly of things. I'm looking at a page from South Africa here, and it's got the 10 courses we had at this beach meal and there's a picture of each of them and I'd forgotten a load of them and I can look at them and remember them all with these little pictures. It's brilliant. Yeah, love it.
I feel like there are two levels to looking at a page of both of your guys' work. There's the kind of macro, looking at it as one. Wow, look at all that in the day or in that location. And then you can really zoom in on one aspect of it as well and get loads and loads of detail. And so there's two bites, I find, two bites at the cherry that I've enjoyed looking at both of those pieces of work.
Because it doesn't force you to look at it from beginning to end, because there is no really a beginning to end. It allows you to just let your eye wander and let it be caught by something that catches your interest, and then maybe read what's written around it, and then like, oh, okay, that's what that is. So it doesn't force the reader to treat it in a specific way as a normal linear written book does.
You're right. There's a lovely freedom at that. I've just remembered mine was on the shelf here. This is my journal.
Lovely.
Ugly, full of words. It's just pages and pages of words from the same trip as Tommy was talking about earlier, Canada. I will probably never read that back because it's not that interesting. I'm glad I did it. Would you recommend people try it, even if they're not good at drawing or sketching, or if they say they're not good at drawing or sketching? Would you recommend, if people were off on their holidays or off on some epic travels, that they gave it a go? Travel journaling through sketching and mind mapping?
Well, I would definitely recommend people to capture their experience in some way, shape, or form, because some people love taking photos, and they take photos of little details, and they do the same thing that I do with my pen with their camera.
Yep.
Or some people write linearly, they write as a narrative, or they make lists of things, or whatever it is. I mean, you don't have to draw. If you really don't like drawing or don't feel it, then you don't have to do it. But one thing also, what I noticed about having this project on my journey and having the little prompts that I made before, or having it gives you a different way of looking at the world, because you might want to ask the things that you see some questions, or you want to find interesting things to see. It happened to me at some points when I had been eating the same thing for 3 days, and I was like, damn, I have to try something local new, because it's getting really boring to draw, I don't know, pancakes in
getting really good at drawing noodles.
Yeah. So or something I learned today. I felt like I walked around with different eyes, like somebody who collects little moments, or like joyful moments, or interesting moments, or observing the people that I see, that I could describe them later for the day. So I feel this act of capturing or wanting to capture might also influence your experience in the moment, because you might be more wide-eyed, open-eyed during the day when you see things.
To build on that, I started doing my own like sketch notes for conferences probably around the same time. I mean, it was like 2004 or 5 or something, but they were just mine, and I tended to just do a mind map. But I got into the habit, and I did a sketch of this a long time ago, which was start 3 mini mind maps at conferences and workshops. And I just put like a central thing for each. One was questions, so I put a question mark. One was people, and draw a little person, and one was ideas, like a little cloud or something. And I found if I would sit down at a conference and put like these things in the corner, a little big question mark, people and ideas, that during the day, I'm always sort of on the lookout for like, oh, I should go speak with that person. They're really interesting. Or, oh, I wonder what I could do with that person's idea from the talk, and I'll add that to the ideas. Or like, oh, it's interesting how this, and I start adding questions. Or I'd be like, oh, I don't have any questions yet, but that's silly, I must have some questions, and I start filling it in. And so having the mind maps, or the idea that I was going to fill these out, changed my experience of being there, because I was always on the lookout for them, in a way, in a similar way that having those lovely prompts for your day, like, oh, what did I eat today, is going to make you pay attention to what's out there that you're going to eat.
That's really nice. Those prompts, that's something that I'm going to take away from this episode. Yeah. Those intentional prompts of what you think you might want to get out of it, and finding a way to remind yourself of it. Before we round this off, is there anything else anyone would like to ask Eva-Lotta about her her work in sketch and sketchnoting and conferences, all of her travel journals.
Eva-Lotta, you've worked with so many people to help them with visual thinking. What do you find people need most when it comes to getting started with visuals and drawing and visual thinking? What do people need the most help with?
The biggest perceived blocker for people is that I can't draw, because they think drawing is an artistic activity, because that's how it's portrayed to us through society and school system and things like that. For me, drawing is more like writing. It's a cultural technique that allows you to express yourself. So the way, and everybody can learn how to draw, how everybody can learn how to write. For some people, it's a little bit steeper. You need a little bit of practice, and you need to understand the system. And that's what I'm trying to do for people. I show them that it's actually a quite modular activity of putting together shapes and putting them together in different proportions and different ways. And then you can build anything like out of Lego. And you need some practice to practice the choreographies and get the routine into your hand. But anybody can learn that, as you can learn how to write. And then you have another way of expressing you, not to replace the words, but to complement the words.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest perceived blocker for people, that they think they can't draw. But I think once you overcame this thing, actually the more interesting things come up about how do you create structure and visual hierarchy, and how do you actually choose what you put on the page, and how do you group it, which has much more to do with things an information architect would do, maybe, what is the big topic, what are subtopics, what things are related.
Yep.
And then there's this third area of what do I actually draw when people are speaking about abstract concepts, which is more about the metaphors and analogies, and maybe having imagination and, doing these forced fits, like with the cars and the ideas, and coming up with images to represent the experience of what that is contained in this concept. Like in this box that we made out of the word as a concept, actually there's a whole world in there, Like every concept can be unpacked. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for me? It can be completely different.
Yeah.
So these are the topics that are actually get really exciting once you get the drawing fear out of the way, where actually the fun starts, right? Where it's like you learn how to write, and then the fun starts, doing your own poetry or writing a really concise report or writing a theater play. It's like you can write anything once you learned how to write. And the same is true with drawing.
So do you have one tip or one piece of advice to help people get over that? I don't know how to draw. I can't draw. Basically
just doing it and accepting. Like I always like to talk about the shitty first draft, which I learned from Anne Lamott, who used that for writing. And the same is true with drawing. Not everything you produce looks amazing. And it's okay if it just looks average in the beginning. And sometimes when it looks shit or weird, actually I find it funny, it's kind of endearing, like animals that look slightly weird, that have this weird beak, or the eyes too close together. And my drawings are like that as well. Like when I look back at the people that I drew in the beginning, they are super wonky, but they are kind of, I have soft feelings for them because they are just a little bit weird. So getting rid of the idea that the things that you draw need to look good. First of all, they need to communicate. And as long as you can see what it is, that's a good basis to build on.
Weird is good.
Weird is good, and in any situation in life.
I agree. I totally agree. It's a bit like that mantra, dance like nobody's watching.
Yes.
Draw like no one will ever see it.
I'd love that thing about everyone can learn how to draw, like you can learn how to write. And I think one of the things that throws people off quite a lot is people. And one of the places where I go, who makes drawing people look so simple and like an alphabet, as you said, and that's you, Eva-Lotta. And I think of you've done these beautiful ones about explaining, I think really interesting challenges like explaining yoga moves, which are so animated, right? You're moving and then you watch the sort of sequence of people, and the people are so simple. You're like, of course I could do that. And I think that's so inspiring about your work, that they're so super clear that they feel really approachable, that anybody can go look at that and go, hang on, I can have a go at that. And of course you'll find it's hard to do it as good as you do it, but you do it so simple and so clear, that I think it's a great way for people to get over that, like, oh, I can't do this.
They are amazing, and I will link to your is it Sketch Yoga? Is that it?
No, the book is called Yoga Notes.
Yoga Notes.
That's because I did my own yoga teacher training in India, and I took notes, obviously, which I actually also made a book of all the notes, of the sketch notes of my yoga teacher training. So all the stuff I learned there.
I'd also hugely encourage people to look at the little people basics. The way you have shown how to draw people. And I don't know if it was your idea, but to basically lose the neck. So and it just makes, therefore, the drawing of the people so much easier, and going with a kind of consistent shape head. So therefore it can be at any angle, the eye, the nose, and with the pages which show about how to use eyebrows for certain expressions and looking in certain directions. And that is just such a clever and simple way for someone to learn how to write in the form of drawing people. It's the best guide I've ever seen in any sketchbook. Thank you so much.
Eva-Lotta, I will also thank you for coming on and sharing your time and expertise with us on the podcast. And we've got quite a creative audience, and I'm sure what we've talked about in this episode will be of huge interest, as well as really inspiring and hopefully helpful as well through the tips and advice and insights you've given. Thank you so much.
And I'm sure the irony won't be lost in the fact that we're doing a podcast in voice about sketches.
That's why we have episode notes.
I'm wondering, Rob, how you're going to do it. Like, the whole podcast is going to be loads of images going through the podcast.
I encourage our listeners to click on the links if on this episode especially. Eva-Lotta, where's best for us to follow your work and your teachings on sketching?
Well, I do have a website where I actually sell my products and my courses.
Yep.
That I teach, and that is called Eva-Lotta.shop, because it's a shop where you can buy things.
I will link to it in the podcast show notes.
And I also have an Instagram at Eva-Lottchen, because in Germany, when you want to make something small, you add a CHEN, which is pronounced chen, so it basically means little Eva-Lotta.
Lovely. So Eva-Lottchen on Instagram, go and check that out. I checked it out, and it also linked me to Eva-Lottchen on skates, which is a whole other story, but it was very, very fun as well. I'll let our listeners explore that and discover that. And are there any exciting projects or anything new that you've got going on that's big for you at the moment that you can share with us?
Well, right now, actually, I'm experimenting with a little new format. I've been teaching online courses to teach people how to draw, like basically, like learning how to write. It's called Pragmatic Sketching Masterclass, and I run it once a year in autumn in English. But this is more instructional with some live feedback sessions, and I wanted to experiment with something where we practice together, because learning is one thing, but keeping it up is another thing. So actually on Monday we had the first pragmatic practice session. 20 people came on live, and we sketched together and shared our sketches with each other, and this is running for another 5 weeks. So I'm still experimenting with the format with the help of the people who are in it, so I will probably tweak it over the time that we are meeting.
Great.
But this is really exciting and really beautiful to think about how you can actually also keep the practice going and the playfulness and share it with other people.
Brilliant. And so if that is something that you decide to continue to offer, I'm sure there'll be information of that up on your website.
Yeah, hopefully I will keep doing it. This is kind of just the first run to see what works and what doesn't.
Brilliant. Eva-Lotta, thank you so much from all of us once again.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for listening. We'll be back next time discussing another of Jono's sketches and seeing how we can embrace its teachings to make ours and maybe your lives a little bit better, or at least fueled with a drop more curiosity. Until then, go well, stay well. Goodbye.
See ya.
All music on this podcast series is provided by the very talented Frank Cinelli, and you can find many more tracks at frankcinelli.com.